My name is Michael Stevens, and until 3:17 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, I thought I understood my value to Titan Industrial Solutions. That's when our new CEO, Scott Peterson, decided to display my salary on the conference room screen and announce to 19 executives that I was overpaid. I'm 47 years old, been the VP of Sales Operations at Titan Industrial in Chicago for 15 years, managing $285 million in annual revenue from 78 major manufacturing clients. My wife Susan teaches high school math. Our two daughters are in college. Emma's a junior at Northwestern studying engineering. Sarah's a sophomore at DePaul majoring in business. Like most guys my age, I'm the primary breadwinner carrying the financial load for our family. Between tuition, our mortgage in Naperville, and everything else, we're not exactly living paycheck to paycheck, but we're not wealthy either. What I wasn't prepared for was Scott Peterson turning my compensation into a public spectacle during his first executive leadership meeting. That Friday morning started like any other. I grabbed coffee with Danny Rodriguez, our CFO, before the executive meeting. Danny mentioned Scott had been asking a lot of questions about departmental budgets and individual compensation packages. Just heads up, Danny said. He's been looking at everyone's numbers with a microscope. The board gave him carte blanche to cut costs. I wasn't particularly worried. My department generated solid results. 18% annual revenue growth, 94% client retention rate, consistently hitting targets. Sure, my compensation was good, $340,000 total package, but I'd earned it over 15 years of building relationships and delivering results. The meeting started normal enough. Scott had been CEO for 6 weeks, brought in by the board after our previous CEO retired. The board's mandate was clear: improve margins, reduce overhead, make the company more competitive. Scott came from a consulting background, McKinsey, then a few smaller firms specializing in corporate restructuring. He was 42, sharp, and had that consultant confidence that everything could be optimized through better analysis. I was sitting with 18 other executives in the main conference room when Scott began his presentation on operational excellence through strategic cost management. The slides looked like classic consulting work: benchmarking charts, industry comparisons, cost per revenue ratios. Several departments were highlighted for what he diplomatically called optimization opportunities. Then he got to individual positions. Several roles were flagged for compensation realignment. Corporate speak for pay cuts or elimination. Marketing director, 2 VP positions, a couple of senior manager roles. Each slide showed current compensation versus industry-aligned benchmarks. Then my position appeared on screen. Michael Stevens, our VP of Sales Operations, Scott said, clicking to a slide showing my compensation details in full view of everyone. Base salary, bonus, structure, benefits package, total annual earnings of $340,000. This represents exactly the kind of misalignment we need to address. The room went dead silent. I felt every pair of eyes in that room shift from the screen to me, then back to Scott. My face got hot, not from embarrassment about my salary, I'd earned every dollar, but from the humiliation of having my personal compensation displayed publicly like evidence in a criminal trial. $340,000 annually for sales operations oversight, Scott continued, his tone suggesting this was obviously excessive. Industry benchmarking data indicates this role should be compensated in the range of $180,000 to $220,000. Michael is currently being paid approximately 55% above market rate for his position. Industry benchmarks. Market rate. Translation. I found some surveys showing what smaller companies pay people with similar titles, and I've decided those numbers should apply here regardless of actual performance or the revenue those people generate. Danny Rodriguez, sitting 3 seats down from me, looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. Scott, Michael generates significant revenue for Titan. His client relationships and account management directly contribute to our bottom line. You can't really separate. Danny, with all respect, that's exactly the justification mentality that creates cost bloat, Scott interrupted, not even looking at Danny as he spoke. Every executive in every company believes their role is uniquely valuable and irreplaceable. That's why we need objective market analysis rather than subjective performance narratives. The data clearly shows Michael is being overcompensated by industry standards. Overcompensated. Overpaid. Said publicly in front of the entire executive leadership team, with my salary details on a screen as evidence of corporate waste and poor decision-making. I could see some executives taking notes. Others were staring at their laptops, clearly trying to avoid making eye contact with me. A few looked genuinely uncomfortable with what was happening, but nobody was speaking up. "Scott," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and professional, "can we discuss this compensation analysis privately? I think there might be some context missing from the benchmarking data. This isn't personal, Michael, it's purely business analysis. Titan needs to align all compensation with market realities if we're going to improve our operating margins and remain competitive. This is about data, not personalities. My compensation reflects 15 years of consistently generating revenue growth and managing client relationships that represent $285 million in annual contracts. Market benchmarks typically don't account for institutional knowledge, client trust, and the revenue protection that comes from established relationships. That's exactly the kind of justification I'm talking about," Scott said, turning slightly to address the room rather than me directly. "Every expensive employee has a narrative about why their situation is special, why they deserve more than market rate. But when we're paying 55% above benchmark for a sales operations role, we have a fundamental cost structure problem that requires correction." Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. 2 people were definitely taking notes now. I noticed that Janet Larson from HR was writing something down and had that carefully neutral expression that HR people get when they're documenting potentially problematic situations. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked quietly. Scott clicked to the next slide, which showed a revised compensation structure for my position. $195,000 base salary, significantly reduced bonus potential, and elimination of several benefits I'd earned through tenure. The slide showed this as a market-aligned compensation structure, a 43% reduction in my total package displayed on screen for 19 executives to review and discuss. We're proposing compensation that reflects current industry standards for sales operations oversight roles. This adjustment saves Titan approximately $145,000 annually and brings your compensation in line with comparable positions at similar companies. It's a necessary step toward operational efficiency. $195,000. Scott Peterson was proposing to cut my compensation by nearly half and presenting it as rational business analysis rather than what it actually was, a public devaluation of 15 years of proven revenue generation. Ever been called overpaid in front of your entire executive team with your salary displayed on screen as evidence of waste? That's when you realize you're not dealing with business analysis. You're dealing with public humiliation disguised as cost optimization. The worst part wasn't the proposed pay cut. It was the assumption that what I'd built over 15 years was just expensive overhead that could be replaced by someone cheaper. "Scott," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible, "I personally manage relationships with 78 manufacturing clients who generate $285 million annually. That's an average of $3.65 million in revenue per client relationship. My total compensation represents about 0.12% of the revenue I directly manage. How exactly is that overpaid? Because market data suggests someone else could manage those relationships for $195,000, Scott replied without hesitation. Your personal involvement isn't what generates that revenue, Michael. Titan's reputation, our product quality, our competitive pricing, those generate revenue. Sales operations oversight is fundamentally an administrative coordination function, not revenue creation. Administrative coordination. 15 years of strategic account management, crisis response during supply chain emergencies, relationship building at industry conferences, late-night calls when clients had equipment failures that could shut down their production lines. All of it reduced to administrative coordination that anyone making $195,000 could handle. Have you discussed this compensation restructuring with any of the clients I manage? I asked. Client relationships are institutional assets, Michael. They work with Titan Industrial Solutions, not with individual sales operations executives. Your role is coordinating internal processes to support those institutional relationships. It's important work, but it's not irreplaceable expertise that justifies premium compensation. I looked around the conference room at executives I'd worked with for years. Some were avoiding eye contact entirely. Others looked genuinely uncomfortable but weren't saying anything. Danny Rodriguez looked like he wanted to object, but was clearly calculating the political cost of challenging the new CEO in his first major presentation. Janet from HR was still taking notes, probably documenting this entire exchange for legal purposes. Smart move, considering what was about to happen. Scott, I need time to consider this restructuring proposal. You have until Monday morning, Scott replied matter-of-factly. The board has already approved these compensation adjustments across multiple positions, and we need to implement them quickly to achieve our Q4 margin improvement targets. Either accept the revised compensation structure, or we'll need to discuss alternative arrangements for your role. Alternative arrangements. Corporate speak for accept the 43% pay cut, or we'll eliminate your position entirely and find someone who will work for $195,000. The meeting continued with similar discussions about other positions, but I stopped listening. I was doing math in my head. Emma's tuition at Northwestern was $58,000 per year. Sarah's at DePaul was $42,000. Our mortgage in Naperville was $4,800 monthly. Susan's teaching salary was good, but not enough to cover everything if I took a $145,000 pay cut. But more than the financial calculation, I was processing the fundamental disrespect of what had just happened. Scott Peterson had publicly characterized 15 years of proven revenue generation as overpaid administrative work. He'd done it in front of 19 people, displaying my personal compensation like evidence in a case for corporate inefficiency. When the meeting finally ended at 4:45 p.m., I walked back to my office in a kind of fog. I closed the door, sat down at my desk, and just stared at the wall for a few minutes. 15 years of client appreciation letters, industry awards for revenue growth and retention, photos from the annual manufacturing leadership conference where I'd built half the relationships that kept Titan competitive. Scott Peterson had just told me that all of that was worth $195,000 instead of $340,000. And he'd announced it publicly as a demonstration of his aggressive cost management approach. What Scott didn't understand, what he couldn't understand with his consulting background, was that in industrial sales, relationships aren't institutional assets that transfer with company. Letterhead. They're personal trust built through years of solving problems during the moments that actually determine whether a client's business succeeds or fails. When Anderson Manufacturing had that supply chain crisis 2 years ago that could have shut down their main production line for 3 weeks, they didn't call Titan's customer service number. They called my cell phone at 11 p.m. on a Sunday because they knew I'd figure out how to get them the parts they needed from our backup suppliers. When Midwest Fabrication was considering switching to a competitor last year because of pricing pressure, they didn't negotiate with our sales department. They called me directly because they trusted my advice about long-term value versus short-term cost savings. I opened my laptop and pulled up my client contact database. 78 manufacturing clients representing $285 million in annual Titan revenue. Most of them had my personal cell phone number. Many had told me over the years that they worked with Titan specifically because they worked with me, not because of our institutional brand or product specifications. Then I found the email I'd been thinking about for the last hour. 4 months ago, Kevin Murphy, CEO of Apex Industrial Group, Titan's primary competitor, had sent me another recruitment offer. Kevin had been trying to hire me for almost 3 years, and his latest proposal had been compelling. Senior VP of Client Relations, complete operational authority over account management, equity participation in the company's growth, and compensation that reflected actual revenue impact rather than market survey benchmarks. I declined that offer 4 months ago out of loyalty to Titan. That loyalty had just been publicly valued at $195,000 instead of $340,000, announced in front of my peers as evidence of poor cost management. At 3:17 p.m., I remember the exact time because I looked at my computer clock before I started typing. I composed what might have been the most important email of my career. Scott and executive team. After careful consideration of today's compensation discussion, I am resigning from Titan Industrial Solutions effective immediately. I have accepted a senior leadership position with Apex Industrial Group, where my compensation will reflect the revenue value I generate rather than arbitrary market benchmarks. I wish Titan continued success with your cost optimization initiatives. Best regards, Michael Stevens. I read it twice, then sent it. No dramatic language, no emotional accusations, just a straightforward business communication announcing my decision. Then I started packing my personal belongings, awards, photos, the client appreciation letters I'd kept over the years. 15 years of building Titan's sales infrastructure, and it all fit in 2 cardboard boxes. I walked out of Titan Industrial Solutions at 4:23 p.m. Friday afternoon, exactly 66 minutes after being called overpaid in front of the entire executive team. By 4:47 p.m., I was sitting in my car in the parking lot making the most important phone call of my career. "Kevin, this is Michael Stevens. Remember that senior VP position you offered me 4 months ago? I just resigned from Titan and I'm very interested in discussing it." "Michael, what happened?" "You've been at Titan for 15 years. The new CEO called me overpaid in front of the entire executive team, displayed my salary on screen as evidence of excessive costs, and gave me until Monday morning to accept a 43% pay cut. I decided not to wait until Monday." There was a pause. Then Kevin started laughing. Not mean laughter, but the kind of laugh you get when someone tells you something so ridiculous it's almost unbelievable. "Anyone who calls you overpaid doesn't understand the first thing about industrial sales," Kevin said. "Can you come to our office Monday morning at 9? Let's finalize the offer and start discussing how to transition your expertise to Apex. And Michael, every client relationship you bring to us is one Titan loses because they chose cost-cutting over revenue generation. I'll be there at 9 a.m. sharp." "Perfect. And just so you know, our offer has only gotten better since 4 months ago. We've had a strong year, and we're ready to make a significant investment in the right leadership. This is going to be very good for you and very expensive for Scott Peterson." When I hung up, I noticed text messages already coming in from Titan executives who'd been in that meeting. "Michael, I can't believe Scott did that publicly. That was completely inappropriate. Are you okay? Did you really just resign? Call me. This is insane. We need to talk." I didn't respond to any of them. What happened next wasn't about them trying to process Scott's poor judgment. It was about Scott Peterson discovering what happens when you publicly devalue someone without understanding what they actually contribute to revenue generation. The drive home to Naperville gave me time to think about how to tell Susan what had happened. We'd been married 22 years, and she knew me well enough to read my mood the second I walked through the door. "How was your day?" she asked, then immediately saw my face. What happened? I sat down at our kitchen table and told her everything. The public salary display, the 43% pay cut proposal, Scott's dismissal of 15 years of relationship building as administrative coordination, my resignation, and the call to Kevin Murphy. Susan listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about her. She processes information before reacting, thinks through implications before getting emotional. "So you quit without discussing it with me first," she said finally. "I quit because staying would have meant accepting that what I've built over 15 years is worth 43% less than what we agreed it was worth when they gave me my last raise 18 months ago. And I wasn't going to sit in that office over the weekend, calculating whether we could afford to keep the girls in college if I accepted Scott's market-aligned compensation structure. What's the offer from Apex? Kevin and I will work out details Monday, but 4 months ago he was talking about $375,000 base plus equity participation. If anything, it's probably better now." Susan was quiet for a moment, doing her own math. The girls' tuition, the mortgage, your pride, in that order. My pride wasn't the primary factor, but it wasn't irrelevant either. Scott Peterson publicly humiliated someone who's generated consistent revenue growth for 15 years. He did it as a demonstration of his cost management philosophy. That's not someone I can work for, regardless of the compensation. "I'm proud of you," Susan said, "not for quitting, for knowing your worth and not accepting less than you deserve. The girls are going to be fine with college. We're going to be fine financially. And Scott Peterson is going to learn some expensive lessons about the difference between cost optimization and revenue destruction." That evening, my phone started ringing with calls from Titan clients who'd somehow heard through industry channels that I'd resigned. The manufacturing community in Chicago isn't that large, and news travels fast when a senior executive leaves unexpectedly. The first call was from Ryan Anderson, CEO of Anderson Manufacturing, my largest client account representing $42 million in annual contracts with Titan. Michael, I'm hearing rumors that you left Titan today. What's going on? I resigned this afternoon after the new CEO decided my compensation was excessive compared to industry benchmarks. I'm joining Apex Industrial Group on Monday. Michael, Anderson has worked with you for 12 years. You've saved our operations more times than I can count. When we had that supply chain crisis with the European suppliers, you personally flew to Germany to sort it out. When we needed emergency parts for the Milwaukee facility, you made it happen over a weekend. We don't work with Titan because of their brand or their pricing. We work with Titan because we work with you. Ryan, I appreciate that more than you know. I have a non-compete agreement that prevents me from actively soliciting Titan clients. But if you independently decide you'd prefer to work with me at Apex, I'd be honored to continue our relationship there. Consider this my independent decision. Can we schedule a call Tuesday afternoon to discuss transitioning our contracts to Apex? I'll need to talk to our procurement team, but honestly, Michael, you are the relationship. The company name on the contract is just paperwork. By 7:30 p.m. Friday evening, I'd received similar calls from 6 more major Titan clients, all of them asking variations of the same question. Can we follow you to Apex? All of them making it clear that their business relationships were with me personally, not with Titan's institutional brand. Scott Peterson had called me, overpaid to save Titan $145,000 annually. What he was about to discover over the next few weeks was that some cost savings are catastrophically expensive when you don't understand the difference between salary expenses and revenue generation. Saturday morning, I played golf with 3 other manufacturing executives, 2 clients, 1 prospect who'd been considering Titan for a major project. Word had already spread through the industry grapevine about what had happened at Titan's executive meeting. So, Scott Peterson really displayed your salary on screen and called it excessive? Asked Tom Wilson from Great Lakes Manufacturing, in front of 19 executives as part of his cost optimization presentation. That's either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, said Pete Martinez from Industrial Solutions Corp. Probably both. Anyone in manufacturing knows that client relationships follow the people who build them, not the companies that employ those people. Speaking of which, Tom said, Great Lakes has been evaluating suppliers for our expansion project. We were leaning toward Titan, but if you're moving to Apex, we should probably talk to them instead. Monday morning at 9 a.m., I was sitting in Kevin Murphy's office at Apex Industrial Group, finalizing my employment contract as Senior VP of Client Relations. Kevin had been true to his word. The offer was even better than what he'd proposed 4 months earlier. $385,000 base salary, 15% equity participation that vested over 4 years, complete operational authority over account management, and a signing bonus that more than covered the transition costs. While we were reviewing contract details, my personal phone started buzzing with forwarded emails from former Titan colleagues. Anderson Manufacturing had formally terminated their supply contracts with Titan effective in 30 days, citing changes in account management relationships and strategic partnership requirements. By 10:30 a.m., I had confirmation that 4 more major manufacturing clients had issued contract termination notices to Titan. All of them referenced account management continuity concerns and relationship-based partnership requirements. Industry language that essentially meant we're following Michael Stevens to wherever he goes. At 12:45 p.m., exactly 72 hours after Scott called me overpaid, my personal phone rang. Scott Peterson. Michael, we need to discuss what's happening. 5 major clients have terminated contracts this morning, and 3 more have indicated they're reviewing their supplier relationships. All of them specifically mentioned your departure in their termination communications. Scott, I'm no longer employed by Titan. Client relationship management is your responsibility now, managed by whoever you hire at the market-aligned $195,000 salary you mentioned Friday. These contract terminations are directly related to your resignation. This looks like coordinated client solicitation, which would violate your non-compete agreement. I haven't contacted a single Titan client, Scott. My non-compete agreement explicitly prohibits solicitation, and I've followed it precisely. If clients are choosing to terminate their Titan contracts, that's their independent business decision based on their evaluation of whether they trust Titan's account management without the person they've worked with for years. 5 major clients in one morning isn't coincidence. It's orchestrated. 5 clients in one morning is what happens when you call someone overpaid in front of the executive team, propose a 43% compensation cut, and then discover those clients actually worked with that person, rather than with your institutional brand. You restructured my position without considering whether clients agreed with your assessment that my role was replaceable administrative coordination. The complete exodus of Titan's client portfolio took exactly 25 days. I watched it unfold from my new office at Apex Industrial Group, monitoring industry news and receiving daily updates from former Titan colleagues who were living through Scott Peterson's catastrophic miscalculation. By the end of week 1, Titan had lost 11 major clients representing $147 million in annual revenue. By week 2, 18 clients totaling $203 million. By week 3, 24 clients representing $251 million, nearly 90% of the portfolio I'd managed. Scott attempted to stop the hemorrhaging through emergency client retention calls, offering extended payment terms, volume discounts, and dedicated account manager assignments. But what he couldn't offer was what clients actually valued: personal relationships with someone who understood their businesses through years of solving problems during operational crises. The industry noticed immediately. By week 2, Manufacturing Today magazine published an article titled "Titan Industrial Faces Major Client Retention Crisis Following Executive Departure." The article specifically noted that the rapid client exodus following Stephen's departure raises fundamental questions about whether Titan's revenue was driven by institutional reputation or personal relationships, a distinction with significant implications for industrial suppliers and their talent retention strategies. Translation: everyone in manufacturing understood exactly what was happening. Scott Peterson had made the catastrophic mistake of believing client revenue was institutional rather than dependent on the relationships that generated that revenue. At 4:15 p.m. on week 3, Scott called again. This time his voice carried none of the confident cost management philosophy he'd displayed in that executive meeting. "Michael, we need to stop this. We've lost over $250 million in client contracts in 3 weeks. The board is demanding explanations and our Q4 projections are completely destroyed. Scott, I'm no longer part of Titan. I have my own responsibilities now at Apex with clients who've independently chosen to work with me. We're prepared to offer complete restoration of your position, full salary restoration to $340,000, plus a 40% increase, equity participation, signing bonus, and complete operational authority over all client relationships. Whatever it takes. Full restoration plus 40% increase." 3 weeks after calling me overpaid and proposing a 43% cut, Scott was offering me $476,000 to come back and try to salvage the client relationships he'd destroyed through his public humiliation strategy. "Scott, I've accepted formal engagement proposals from 31 former Titan clients representing $267 million in annual contracts. Apex is fully operational with revenue commitments that exceed what I managed at Titan. Why would I return to a company where the CEO publicly characterized me as overpaid administrative coordination? Because you built those relationships over 15 years at Titan. 15 years that you valued at $195,000 as replaceable overhead. 3 weeks ago, you displayed my salary as evidence of excessive costs. Today, you're offering 40% more than I earned because you've discovered that clients weren't working with Titan. They were working with me. What's changed isn't my value, Scott. What's changed is your understanding of what generates revenue. The financial impact was devastating. Titan's revenue dropped 32% in a single quarter. Unable to maintain operational costs without dramatic downsizing, they laid off 127 employees across sales, operations, and support functions. The company that had restructured my position to save $145,000 annually was now eliminating hundreds of jobs to survive the revenue crisis my departure had triggered. By month 2, Scott Peterson was removed as CEO by the board, citing strategic misjudgment regarding client relationship architecture and executive talent management. He took a position at a regional industrial distributor, a significant step down from leading a major supplier. By month 4, Titan Industrial Solutions was acquired by a larger conglomerate at approximately 45% of their valuation from 6 months earlier. The acquisition announcement specifically mentioned client retention challenges and revenue stabilization requirements as factors affecting the purchase price. Meanwhile, Apex Industrial Group was experiencing unprecedented growth. In my first quarter as Senior VP of Client Relations, I'd successfully established contracts with 35 former Titan clients who had independently chosen to work with me, plus 8 new clients who approached Apex based on industry reputation. Combined annual revenue, $312 million, exceeding what I'd generated at Titan. 18 months later, Harvard Business Review published a case study titled "The $145,000 Cost Savings That Destroyed $285 million in Revenue When Market Benchmarks Replace Value Analysis." The article became required reading in business school programs used specifically to illustrate the critical distinction between salary costs and revenue generation value in relationship-driven industries. I kept one memento from my Titan years, a screenshot of Scott's PowerPoint slide showing my salary displayed as evidence of excessive costs. It's framed in my office at Apex, next to the Industrial Sales Leadership Award I received 8 months after joining the company. Sometimes the most expensive business education comes from learning that client relationships aren't administrative overhead. They're personal trust built over years of solving problems during moments that determine business success or failure. I got called overpaid at a meeting, so I walked out and their revenue dropped 32%. Not through solicitation, but through clients independently choosing to follow expertise they'd trusted for 15 years. That's not revenge. That's the market teaching Scott Peterson what I apparently couldn't. Relationships follow the people who build them, not the companies that undervalue those people.